Welcome back to the Den of Nerds. I'm Josh, and we need to talk about the Superman ending. The movie's out, and it has a pretty wild ending, but it's also not completely obvious what exactly happened. So in this video, we'll break it all down. I'll talk about what exactly goes on in the ending of this film, and I also want to add in a few theories I have. There's a couple of things that happen that I think are actually teases for future development for some characters and this universe overall. So obviously, spoiler warnings, but also, here we go, Superman ending explained. I think the best way to start is by talking about the beginning of the third act. Lex Luthor, the obvious villain of the movie, is trying to make this war happen like the whole time. And part of this is so that he can get half of this other country. But it's also kind of revealed that he did all of this to make Superman an enemy of the state and an escaped convict so that Lex Luthor would be justified in killing him. Now, things don't go according to plan because Lex Luthor's girlfriend sends a bunch of info to Jimmy Olsen that was in the form of selfies and thirst traps that actually conveniently had information about Luthor's plan and evidence of it being what it was. Now, look, I'm not going to get too far into this exact plot point because it's just a catalyst for all the stuff that happens at the end of the film. But yes, it is the most goddamn James Gunn thing I've ever seen in my life. And yes, I'm hoping that the future movies have much better plots. However, what I think is like so much more important than how we got there is the result of this action. Lex literally did not see this coming. He is furious when Superman escapes his pocket universe. And you can really see him start to unravel and he gets real crazy. He's desperate. He's angry. And that is really important to understanding the ending of this film. Luthor then opens one of the portals in Metropolis and starts to overload it so that it becomes a black hole. Essentially, he creates a devastating, possibly Earth-ending phenomenon in Metropolis simply to make sure that Superman does not go stop that war, and probably so that he can actually kill Superman. So Superman, after having a nice talk with his family over in Kansas, is ready to go stop this war. However, Mr. Terrific hits him up with one of the T-Spheres and is like, bro, you need to come help me in Metropolis, otherwise there's not even gonna be a world to save. So Superman goes to Metropolis and he is immediately confronted by Ultraman and by the Engineer. This is the famous fight scene that happens partially in the baseball stadium. Ultraman continues to be controlled by Lex Luthor, who is watching Superman's every moves and kind of using Ultraman like a video game character. On a side note, I love this part, man. I actually really appreciated this part of the plot. Luthor would be that guy, and it did feel like something a gamer would do. So it gets to a point where Superman gets blasted by one of Engineer's like super attacks or whatever. She charged her meter enough in the fight and then unloads a special attack. Superman gets blasted. It looks like he's down and out. And then the Engineer uses her nanites to enter into Superman's body, cutting off his optic nerve, filling his lungs so that he can't breathe. And this is all part of Lex Luthor's design as well. This is how he plans to kill Superman. So Superman, being unable to see and unable to breathe, just does something, I guess, instinctually and just flies up into the upper atmosphere. And then he slams back down into the planet. Now, I will admit, this is not the best plan. This is not a thinking Superman. This is not a highly advanced Superman. I mean, to be fair, he's only been Superman for 3 years. But yeah, he just fly up real high and smash down into the ground. That's the plan. But it works. You know, credit where credit is due. That works. And it's kind of like dropping your cell phone. Like all the nanites just don't work anymore. Superman's able to kind of pull them out of his body, vomit them up a little bit, and then fight. Now, at this point, Ultraman is revealed to be the clone of Clark Kent, right? And so we can see this is a clone of David. Superman remarks like, oh, that's how you were able to get into the Fortress of Solitude, which is totally true. But I also want to point out there that I don't think Luthor should even be saying this, but you got to remember, Luthor has kind of lost it at this point. He didn't see this coming. He is desperate. He is angry. He is acting a fool. Now, Superman calls Krypto into the fight, who gives him some serious backup against Ultraman. However, Luthor makes another crucial mistake by continuing to talk shit to Superman through the intercom on Ultraman's chest. And Luthor is literally calling out the moves. He's doing the combos and calling it out as he's fighting Superman. Superman sees this. He realizes what's going on, and he tells Krypto to get the toys, meaning the drones. Then Krypto destroys all of the drones, making it so Ultraman has to fight on his own without the benefit of Lex Luthor's sight and calling those moves. And Ultraman sucks. He's real dumb. not a good fighter. But also, I guess technically Superman isn't that great either, because he still almost gets beat by Ultraman. Like, I don't know if anybody saw this, but basically it gets to like a real desperate point. Superman does pull a crazy maneuver, dislocating his shoulder in order to move out of the way of this bus that's being sucked into the black hole. The bus hits Ultraman and sucks him into the black hole. Now, I want to stop here for a second because I think this is going to come back later in the DCU. I think this clone of Superman did not die in this scene, but was instead likely transported to either that pocket universe that Lex Luthor created, or potentially to another universe or another planet somewhere far out in the cosmos. We don't exactly know how that would work, right? Because there's technically a black hole even within that pocket universe. Is that the same black hole that this Superman clone was sucked into? Or is this a black hole that then goes into the pocket universe and then there's another black hole? Either way, the point I'm making is I believe that Superman clone will end up becoming Bizarro in the DCU. Partially because he seems like he's just a dumb clone of Superman, but also because I think this ending to the character in the film of going in to that black hole, I believe that was intentional. I believe that will be something that is brought up in the future. And after stopping Ultraman and the Engineer, Mr. Terrific and Superman fly to stop Lex Luthor from leaving and bailing on the whole situation so that they can then shut down the pocket universe thing that's expanding and destroying Metropolis. But meanwhile, that war is still going on. And if nothing happens, if Superman can't get over there, that war is going to end. And this other country that is an American ally will take control of this other smaller territory. But alas, Superman has made a difference and he has changed the mind of the Justice Gang. And so the Justice Gang, now with Metallo, go to the battle zone and stop the war instead of Superman. This scene was really cool, action-packed. I actually like Guy Gardner a lot in this individual scene. But we got to stop for a second and talk about the impact on the DCU. This is a group of superheroes that are funded by another billionaire, right? So they were funded by Maxwell Lord. They are not funded by Lex Luthor. This is a privately funded group of superheroes that at the end of this film actually goes into a war zone and takes a huge international incident into their own hands. And it's outside of the purview of the United States government. This was not what the United States government wanted to do. I think that's going to have major ramifications for this exact universe, and I would imagine it might be the first time this has ever happened. And what's cool about that is the character of Superman becomes a catalyst for this thing that is now going to operate outside of the purview of these governments and potentially outside of the purview of Maxwell Lord himself. We see Maxwell Lord at the end of the film, and he's obviously gloating about Lex Luthor's downfall, which we're going to get into in a second, but it looks like he's going somewhere. Maybe he's going to the Hall of Justice to speak to these heroes themselves. Maybe he's trying to go to the government and figure out what the next solution is. Either way, it seems like they are building towards an actual Justice League. That was just broke on Friday in the Wall Street Journal. They are clearly building towards a Justice League, and I think this event at the end of the film is actually a really important beginning to what will lead us to an actual Justice League that is likely not actually operating under the purview of any particular government or billionaire other than Batman, right? Because Bruce is probably going to take control of that shit for real, for real. Now, another really important aspect to this ending is what is going on with all of the reporters. So obviously Jimmy Olsen had a source that was the girlfriend of Lex Luthor. That's where Jimmy gets all of the information. However, Perry White and the Daily Planet decide to actually publish that article. So they get in the T-Sphere ship that Mr. Terrific gave to Lois Lane. They are able to escape the destruction of Metropolis from the black hole that Luthor opens. And they also then publish a very important article which lays out Lex Luthor's actual plan to start this incident in order to take control of half of this other country. And the world turns on Luthor. Even people that were very friendly to him consider him to be a traitor. And we see in that moment where Mr. Terrific and Clark do go stop Luthor from escaping, and they've basically controlled the threat. Mr. Terrific goes over to the console and pushes the dude out of the way, and he says, "I'm the goddamn Mr. Terrific." And then he shuts down the thing because he's really good with tech and shit. And Superman and Luthor have classic comic book dialogue back and forth. Two really cool speeches that feel like they were ripped right out of All-Star Superman. But the important context here is like how all of this comes together, because before the ending, everybody was turning on Superman. He was literally a prisoner of the United States government. There was an international incident happening where an actual U.S. ally was about to take this territory, and everybody seemed cool cool with it. Justice Gang wasn't going to do shit. They're operating under the purview of Lord and not trying to step on the toes of international incidents. And Superman was considered to be this alien threat that was potentially going to try to take over the planet. And Superman wins over the Justice Gang. They go interfere, being real ass heroes. And then Jimmy Olsen publishes this big article which has the whole world turn on Luthor and support Superman once again for being a hero. And this is really important because it shows that Superman and the Justice Gang actually could have potentially been looked at as bad actors or as people that crossed the line. But the fact that the whole public turns against Luthor allows the narrative to go easy on the Justice Gang and on Superman. Like, it seems like in the DCU, in this actual universe, the events of this film basically unfold in such a way where most of the public around the world is supporting Superman and they're supporting the Justice Gang. They're supporting the heroes over any particular billionaire or government. That is fascinating and will likely have implications for the rest of this universe. You even see a little bit of this at the end when you have those really powerful world leaders that were meeting with Luthor and all this sort of stuff. They're talking about how things are different now, but they have to be looking out for the Kryptonians still. If I were a government, I would be really freaked out after the ending of this film, and maybe that is something that you will also see play out in future installments. So that's basically how it goes down. After the speeches, Krypto does rough Luthor up, I think even breaking his arm. Luthor gets taken to prison, but then there's another really important thing we got to talk about here. Supergirl is revealed at the end of this film. She is revealed, obviously, to be Clark Kent's cousin. It is revealed that Krypto is her dog, and that's why he has behavioral issues, because he's basically the dog of a young lady that's a total mess. She's a mess, man. She comes into the scene drunk. She's really rude and abrasive to her cousin. She doesn't reprimand Krypto at all. And it's a really cool scene, actually, because it has Clark just being the cousin, being the Boy Scout, being disappointed. The Superman robots are backing him up. And yet we do get introduced to some fun ideas about Kara. Number one, she likes to go party on planets with a red sun. Apparently, red sun in this universe makes it so the Kryptonians can metabolize alcohol and actually get drunk. They cannot do that under the yellow sun. So that is the explanation for why Kara goes off-world to party. However, there is a big question about Kara that is seemingly a big plot hole here, and that's the fact that in the comics, Kara is super familiar with the Kryptonian lore, the Kryptonian culture. She is raised within the Kryptonian world until she's like 15 in the comics. So what I'm trying to say is, if the Kryptonians were sending all of their people out to try to dominate the galaxy and to be true conquerors of other worlds, you would imagine that's something that Kara would have brought up to Clark. Now, what I think this speaks to is the fact that the message from Clark's parents might be, I don't want to say misunderstood, because I think they meant what they said, but it might just be one of those things where like that culture just thinks that is the right way to do things. They're not necessarily being malicious. They're not necessarily a culture that wants to go out there and dominate the galaxy, but maybe they just view this as the way to try to save Krypton. And so it is possible that the Kryptonian culture that Kara is around is slightly different, because there might not have been the imminent threat of Krypton being destroyed. Perhaps the parents of Kal-El are saying what they are saying in the wake of the planet being destroyed, and therefore are taking some considerations that might seem extreme or crazy, but are ultimately not as malicious as you might think if you just see him in this film. It's also possible this is something that Kara was keeping from Clark. Maybe they had some difficult conversations where the subject was broached, but Clark just wasn't willing to bend and was very like, no, that's not what it is. Maybe this is even why Kara drinks, right? There's a lot of immaturity here. There's obviously the fact that she's kind of a mess, but where does that come from? Where does that pain come from? Is this something that she's been quietly holding on to? Is she aware of the reputation that Kryptonians have in the wider universe, and is that weighing down on her? Or is this a piece of Kryptonian history that she's just completely missing? Because as far as I remember, Kara's ship was not out there because Krypton was going to be destroyed. It just happened to be destroyed, and then her city and her world just existed and went on in a different direction. There's a lot of mystery here. We're going to see how it plays out in the Supergirl movie. However, I thought Millie was awesome. I like the Supergirl outfit. I like the fact that she's a drunken mess. That's going to make for a really entertaining movie, but it's also going to make for a really cool character arc as she grows and matures. Or maybe doesn't. We'll see. And that is basically the ending, but I want to say a couple more things. Number one, I think this film actually does leave all the characters in a really interesting position. Luthor is obviously in prison. However, there are a lot of people that I think will still support Luthor's vision. Frankly, a lot of those people in the government, I think, are going to be more afraid of the metahumans and more afraid of Superman than ever. And that might lead them to secretly supporting Luthor or allowing Luthor to continue his research even through prison. Technically, in All-Star Superman, Luthor is doing a whole bunch of planning and scheming and machinations, and he's in prison for a lot of that book. So it's not like this is something Luthor couldn't do, right? And so I think the movie sets Luthor up to want more than ever to stop Superman and potentially have the resources and the ability to do that in the future. I also want to circle back to the whole idea of the Justice League. The Justice Gang is obviously a thing. It's going to be so interesting to see how that team develops, what's going on with that team. We might get a hint at how that's going in the Lantern show. If the Lantern show takes place after the Superman movie, then when we see Guy Gardner in the Lantern show, it's possible through just some dialogue or perhaps a scene itself, we will get context for like, what is Guy Gardner actually doing right now? Is he still a part of the Justice Gang? Is the Justice Gang even a thing still? That's going to be fascinating. And I think just in general, the mystery around the Lanterns is something I'm fascinated to know more about. And that's why I'm really excited for this coming Lantern show. I also think the character of Superman is put in a really interesting spot at the end of this film. I think Clark knows he needs to do better. I think he knows he needs to literally grow as a human being and as a superhero. I think he needs to get stronger. I think he needs to get smarter. I think he needs to get more strategic and cunning in his battle. I'm personally kind of hoping for similar development that you had with the Captain America character from Captain America 1 into Captain America 2. Like in Captain America 1, Steve Rogers is just emerging and he's capable. He's good, right? But he's not like using the shield in crazy ways. He's not like this seasoned veteran of knowing how to use his abilities. But then you go into Captain America 2 and this dude's like banging the shield around with pinpoint accuracy, doing flip kicks and crazy shit I've never seen. It was so obvious that Cap had been training, putting the time in, and was just so much better than he was in his first movie in the second film. I'm hoping for some of that with Clark, man, because again, flying up real high, slamming down on the ground, not a great plan. But anyway, that's the ending explained for the Superman movie. I like this movie a lot, man. I'm really hoping we get more DCU, and I'm excited and interested in how all the characters in the story will go from here. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.